Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our PAM Town Hall Forum for the month of October. I'm your host, Andrew Perkins. Today, our topic is Hymns and Songs from the Heart of the Black Church. Our guest today is the Reverend Carlton Johnson, Coordinator of Vital Congregations in the Presbyterian Mission Agency. Reverend Johnson recently penned an article on this subject in the 55.2 issue of the Call to Worship Journal. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of today's presentation. Please feel free to submit questions or comments in the chat at any time. Our discussion will be moderated by PAM President-elect Mark Kemp, Director of Music at Westminster Presbyterian Church, Greenville, South Carolina. And now, please welcome our guest, Reverend Carlton Johnson.
Good morning, everyone. Try to get myself together a little more there, but good morning, everyone, and good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Carlton, and thank you for being here this morning, spending time with us. And Kara, I see you just over in the corner. We're glad that
yes, my wife is with me this morning. She is going to act as my. Normally, I'm her backup, but today she'll be my backup and acting as my congregation.
Amen.
For several parts of the worship.
Well, Carlton, before we dig in to your article that I've enjoyed so well, I'd like to show everyone and make sure we're all aware of the most recent issue of Call to Worship, which is centered around the topic of dismantling racism in worship. It came to my mailbox Monday, so it is hot off the presses, and it includes articles, so many wonderful articles, but including yours on hymn interpretation in the Black church, Marlon Hurst, who is writing on the welcome table, and it really does a wonderful job of engaging us all and challenging us to take a closer look at the perspective that we bring to our own worship service, which should be the most open opportunity for us to share with one another, but somehow we have made it a way to be apart from one another. So the number one thing that we all need to do is inform ourselves and to know of one another's perspectives. And that's what I appreciate so much about what you bring to this. Our conversation that we had in preparation for today was so enlightening to me because I have never heard of this. Now I have heard it, but I've heard it explained, and it takes on such a deep meaning and brings about a whole nother set of questions for me that I'm looking forward to getting into and hearing from those that are on board with us today. So as you all hear Carlton, as we go through and as Carlton and Kara demonstrate, be sure to type those questions in the chat. So hopefully at the end of our time together, we can share and learn even more from one another. So Carlton, take us away.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, you all. One of the joys of working from home is oftentimes you get folks to kind of walk in the middle of a presentation. And so we do our best under those circumstances. But thank you so much. I am going to share screen now. Here we are. Does everyone see, Mark, do you see stretching out there?
Yes, sir. You're good to go.
Awesome. And so, I used this on the lead slide. This was the title of the article, Stretching Out, Hymn Interpretation in the Black Church. When I talked to Dr. Long not too many months ago, feels like years ago now, she asked about what it meant for us to interpret or how we interpreted some of the traditional hymns in the Presbyterian hymn book or hymn books, and the unique ways that they are done in Black churches. And the first thing that came to mind as I began the work was this sort of a shout that came from different church members during the time someone would lead one of these hymns, and it would be sort of this thing to say, go ahead and stretch on out with it now. And so that was where this title came from, Stretching Out. So I will ask if you all will bear with me during the first part of the presentation. I understand that this is going to be some delicate and heavy history stuff for many folks that either may not have heard it before, or you may have heard it and, for lack of better words, been triggered by it before. But I will ask that you are patient with us, and certainly be patient with yourself, graceful with yourself. If you have to step away and come back to it, please do. Likewise, if you watch the recording at a later time, be graceful with yourself. So the picture or pictures I'm going to share first here are, yeah, do that. This is a picture of Elamina Castle, located east of Ghana's capital city of Accra. It's in the Cape Coast region. It's beautiful. As you can see, it's a whitewashed building right there on the shore. It was originally built to act as a trading post and house missionaries, Christian missionaries, to Africa. Inside of that compound, the lower picture you'll see is a picture of an actual church. We know this from historical records, but also if you go inside of that structure, there is or were benches with, for obviously for seating, but that had Christian etchings on it. That is the fish, and in different other places in there, the cross. So this was in fact a church. Here's the irony. This compound was later used to house humans, enslaved African people, who the slaveholders would either sometime before or sometime after going into the area where the captured African people were, abusing them, raping young women, young boys, and older men. And they would go back into this building for worship. Again, before, during, and after. And again, this is from historical records of that time. And it's an irony that we have both in the same place, but more concerning, and this is sort of some of the stuff that we have to keep in mind when we're doing our discipleship work, is that younger people know this now. They know that there was this, these two things going on simultaneously. But one of the reasons I also brought this to bear is that these were not people that were captured and enslaved that had no religion. These were not people who did not understand the concept of a high God. In fact, they had a concept of Trinity. The picture on the left is Osiris, Isis, and Horus. So they had an idea, an understanding of Trinity. They even understood the identity, or rather the idea of virgin birth. Again, that's Isis with Horus, and you can see how that image was changed through history. So they understood the ideas of Trinity and virgin birth, and many of the things that we now call Christianity through our understanding of the biblical text. But what was sad was that it was assumed that they had no knowledge, or more importantly, what they did know was called pagan and heathen. So Dr. Love Henry Welchel, professor of church history at the ITC in Atlanta, Georgia, coined the phrase natal separation, that is separation from Mother Africa, to describe the systematic and intentional identity theft, which left the African devoid of any directly traceable cultural links to the Africa from which they were kidnapped. Natal separation included denial of the enslaved African to any of their indigenous traditions and practices, including drumming, dancing, worship of African deities, ancestral veneration, and funeral rites. Their native practices, again, were seen as heathen or pagan, and ultimately written into law as punishable offenses. So singing in the ways that they sang in their homeland, dancing, drumming, could be punishable and actually get them killed, which is odd when I share the next piece. But also one of the things that a little later in history they were prohibited from doing was reading or demonstrating that they knew how to read. Let's talk about this scripture text here for a moment. This is part of the beginning of the article I shared. We know this from Psalm 137, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion, when we remembered Africa. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof, for there they carried us away captive and required of us a song. They required of us a song. Aboard the slave ships and on the hot, sticky, unbearable plantations in the South, they required of African people a song, saying to them, sing us one of your songs. To which my ancestors had to think, how can we sing the Lord in this strange land? Again, remembering that Christianity in a particular way, right? They understood Christianity. They understood all of the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. They understood all of those. They had all of those, but Christianity was being taught to them in a different way, and in a way that did not match anything they understood about the high God. And so more importantly, these requests for song were like, all of this is strange, not just the soil of America, but all of this is strange. So how do we sing our songs in this environment? Dr. W.B. Du Bois shared this note in his book, The Souls of Black Folks. So we brought our gifts and mingled them with yours, a gift of story and song, soft, stirring melody in an ill-harmonized and unmelodious land, a strange land. Our song, our toil, our cheer and warning have been given to this nation in blood brotherhood. Actively, we have woven ourselves with the very warp and woof of this nation. We fought in their battles and shared their sorrow and mingled our blood with theirs. And generation after generation have pleaded with a headstrong, careless people to despise not justice, mercy, and truth. I want to pause there with this note from Dr. Boyce, that what he was saying and what I want you to understand about the interpretation of the hymns and the singing in the Black church is more than just this idea that we like to jazz the music up. You know, I've heard this over and over again, that it's not really translation of the music. And I'm not saying anyone on this call said this. I'm saying this is what I've heard in my lifetime, is that we just like to add beats and rhythms to the music. We like to jazz it up. In fact, I heard one lady ask me, it's you make the hymn sound funky. Okay. But it's more to it than that. And what you really hear in the sounds, in the ebbs and flows of the music is pain. What you really hear is pain. You hear cries of desperation. You hear pleas for help. And you hear it sometimes in the lyrics that are already there. But more importantly, you hear it in the swells. You hear it in the emphasis on particular parts of the song. But you also see it in the body language of those who are singing, or if I can use the word, performing the hymn or the song at that time. What an interesting part of the idea of these enslaved people being asked to sing and being taken to church, if you will, each Sunday was what Dr. Riggins Earl in the book Dark Symbols and Obscure Signs shared as this idea of soulless bodies and bodiless souls. In a nutshell, as long as they were enslaved and working, their bodies were all that was important, right? And not in the way of honoring their body, just how much work can I get out of this body? Because this body has no soul. It has no soul. But ultimately, it is our, watch this, Christian responsibility. It is our Christian duty to make their soul, whatever small soul there is, fit for heaven. For many who would not believe that even the soul of an African could abide in the same heaven as that of a whiter person, the balconies of many churches built in the 19th century, and by the way, 20th century, to keep the enslaved Africans, were built to keep the enslaved Africans as far away from whites as possible. And they became known as, you see it, nigger heaven. So in other words, your bodies can't get to heaven. So as close as you'll ever get to heaven is up there in yonder balcony. But it is our Christian responsibility to make your souls ready for heaven. So again, here are churches with some of those balconies. These are mega churches by any stretch of the imagination. They're mega buildings. Even the church on the right is larger than the type of church that I grew up in. And in fact, it's larger than mostly the type of church that you'll hear the types of songs that we'll talk about today performed in. Those songs mostly show up in smaller churches that look like these. Smaller churches that look like these, and typically, even though occasionally, and we'll see in a later slide how there are deacons and deaconess who are responsible for going up front, raising the hymns of the church. Oftentimes, the hymn exhorter or hymn raiser was an elder that is sitting in the congregation or just sitting over in the deacon's area, like the gentleman sitting on the lower right of your screen. And they would raise and sing the whole hymn from that seated position. We'll see a young lady do that in one of our clips a bit later. So, excuse me. So the way of these songs is called old metering. Most of you all are familiar with metering of a hymn or metering a song. We have short meter and long metered hymns. We're pretty familiar with that terminology. But old metering a hymn is a kind of undocumented or underdocumented form. Old metering a hymn slows the cadence significantly, almost to that of a dirge. Therein, through swells and emphasis of particular words, the lament, the sincere pleas for help, the pain and the truth of the present day drama and the ancestral saga of the Black experience in America can be heard in the desperate cries in and between each word, each line, and each verse. So I want you to remember this unique way of metering a hymn. It's called old metering, old meter. Old metered hymns are performed in sort of a call and response technique. Call and response is certainly a technique that is an import from Mother Africa. And this call and response technique is done in an art form called hymnlining. Now, if you'll remember at the beginning of today's presentation, we talked about how if an enslaved African, and for many years, even into Jim Crow, to find out that a Black person could read could get you hurt. To be found out that you could read could get you hurt. To even hold a book get you hurt, or get you killed. This is America. And so in order to execute the hymns, an identified leader would commit the words of the hymn to memory. And when gathered, the leader or exhorter would line out or chant the lyrics immediately after calling out a few words or a sentence of the hymn. The assembled congregation would sing the line responsibly. The exhorter would then call out the next line, and the cycle continued until the song's completion. The beauty in hymnlining is that particularly seasoned or talented exhorters might add a personal melodic note or so, very bluesy, if you will. And they may oftentimes add testimonial phrases to the called out lines. Their emphasis on a word or phrase is shared in the melody by the responding congregation. Here's a word that many of you that are musicians have heard. In this melisma, both the exhorter and the congregation take liberties each time and in each place the hymn is sung. So what I'm saying by that is occasionally you'll hear a hymn sung, same exhorter, sing the hymn in different places, but different congregations will have different ways of responding to the hymn line. So as I mentioned earlier, though you occasionally would see the elder that sat in the corner in traditional, especially Baptist church traditions, you'll have a group of sisters or a group of brothers, deaconess or deacons, if you will, to come to the front. In modern times, they line up in front of microphones, but in my childhood, that wasn't the case. There would just be a few chairs in the front. The elders would sit there and they would begin what we called at that time mostly devotion service. Today, we begin our worship services with what we call praise and worship. At that time, and still in many of these churches, they begin what's called devotion service. And so I'm going to demonstrate here what some of that lined hymn sounds or looks like. Along with me this morning is my wife, Kara. She's going to act as my other audience or rest of the congregation while I attempt to be the exhorter. So the song is Guide Me, O Thy Great Jehovah, Pilgrim Through This Barren Land. So the exhorter would literally line out the words with a cadence that sounds something like this. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, Lord, but thou art mighty. Hold me with your powerful hand. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven. and feed me till I want no more. So that's how aligned hymn, again, probably heard "Guide Me, O Thy Great Jehovah" tens and hundreds of times. Thank you, Kara. But as Dr. Callahan states, possibly more than any other biblical narrative, the Exodus was the biblical argument that God opposed the institution of slavery and that God would return a catastrophic judgment against America, as was true of Egypt. In it, we find our own ongoing aspirations for liberation, freedom, and equality. So there was a particular tie, or might I say, there is a particular tie to this hymn for Black folk in Black church, that it is Jehovah alone, great Jehovah, to guide us through this barren land, this as Dr. Du Bois called it, this unmelodious land, this present day, as well as our ancestral American experience. Here's another connection with this song, though. Again, as I mentioned earlier, oftentimes there's more being spoken to in the song than just singing it or changing the metering. There's actually the plea of the congregation. The last verse we sang, which we'll do just again here, where it says, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, oh, bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. I can tell you that in many times in the church of my upbringing, and probably at Israel too, the church where you were raised here, this is the time where what we would say is the church would go up. People would actually recognize at this point in the hymn about their lack of bread, right? So in the lyrics, we're speaking bread of heaven, you know, manna being connected to God send down the Holy Spirit, but they're actually thinking of their lack of resources. In the church of my upbringing, the congregation connected with a real need for God to supply food and other resources. In a 2016 Pew Research found that the average household income of the top 3 predominantly African-American denominations ranks lowest among all surveyed. Of course, our own PCUSA ranks among the highest. But over 70% of those, over 70% of these mostly single parent households struggled for bread from day to day, with a gross annual income of less than $50,000 for the whole household. So again, this plea for bread, this plea for resources is another real connection, a tangible connection to this hymn, as you'll hear many such connections in these lined hymns. So I want to take just a moment here to introduce you all to somebody. The person that taught me these lined hymns. This is my father, the Deacon David Johnson. He went home to be with the Lord in 1993. But at that time, that is during my childhood, he and deacons like him taught us how to line these hymns. That was sort of a rite of passage into adulthood. Yes, you can kind of see my mirror image in the picture there. So definitely, I hope to walk in his image in doing things like this. But it was important for them to make sure that this tradition of singing these songs was continued. And I can tell you that in many churches today, it's thought of, and I have to say it, as uncivilized or uneducated to sing these old metered hymns. But those like myself, who were taught by the good deacon here, and this gentleman on the lower part of your screen, the Reverend Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., were told regularly, during our upbringing that it was important to carry on these hymns. In the upper left corner is Dewey's father, the Reverend Eddie Dewey Smith Sr. Reverend E. Dewey Smith is actually pastor now of the Greater Travelers Rest Baptist Church, where the gentleman in the upper right was his predecessor. I'm going to show you a quick clip of Reverend Dr. E. Dewey Smith doing the funeral of Reverend Shepherd. Bear with us just for a moment while we pull this up. Hopefully there won't be too much commercial.
Your time and we'll be gone. Pastor didn't want to be here all day long, but he wanted us to do this in his honor, and I want you to help me do it. Lord, I would, help me say it, come. That's what he wanted us to do. I took thee, yeah. Let me hear you. Sin, oh, no. Oh, I did. Oh, take the stain of guilt away, and on me as that child. Oh, let me hear you. Take, this is what it wants to do. Stay. This was his hymn. Yield our way, oh heaven and on. I need me. I cannot live in sin and feel the Savior's love. Let me hear you travel rest. I can't. I not live. Sin and fear my say I oh can make my spirit clean and write my name above that. Let me hear you. This was his hymn. Blood, ooh, can make my spirit clean, oh heaven and right. My name.
Sorry about that. I almost hit cancel the webinar. So sorry about that. I showed a little longer portion of that clip than I normally would, because I wanted everyone to see how Reverend Dr. Smith ended the hymn the same way that Kara and I ended the hymn that we demonstrated. And that is in that these hymns, these line hymns, typically end, first of all, with moaning, right? There's typically someone who will say something along the lines of, the enemy can't understand what you're talking about when you moan. That is to point to the fact that often within the words or the melodies added to these hymns, the specific emphasis on particular parts of the hymn, during the enslavement of African people, there were coded messages about where food might be found, and more importantly, about escape. So that the reminder to the worshiper that there was the ability to speak in code, to moan, and so that the enemy didn't know. And again, at that time, the coded in there was the enemy being Satan, but the enemy, in fact, at that time of those people were their enslavers. I'm going to share screen again and just kind of move through. I know our time is moving right along. Let's see. Okay, Mark, can we all see my screen again?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So this is a particularly interesting video clip I'll show a lot shorter of, but as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of intention of making sure that there are younger people that know how to keep this tradition alive. This young lady's name is Candace Hicks. It was purely amazing the first time I saw this for two reasons. Undeniably, particularly the Baptist church and at this time in history, was these exhorters were mostly men, and definitely men of a quote unquote certain age. But I want you to hear how this young lady was not only taught the words of the hymn and the cadence, but how she has been taught to embrace and actually sing with the level of emotion. And what's really important is I want you to see how the men, the older men who are on this dais with her, celebrate her, the fact that, wow, in so many words, they're gonna say, this kid's got it. This tradition will not die. Here we go. that. So I think it's it always impresses me that she did that with no fear, because I can tell you when I was her age, that was probably the most nerve-wracking thing in the world, was to need to sing in front of these seasoned hymn singers. So gonna move on a little bit more here. All of the hymns that you've heard thus far, those lined hymns, pretty much followed the same cadence. Most of them follow a limited cadence, but I want to introduce or sing this one real quick. Kara, gonna pull her back in again, because this particular lined hymn was adopted with the idea of what it meant to be on a workforce. So what you'll hear is sort of the cadence of a work crew. These hymns were not just, thank you. These hymns were not just expressions of pain, but they were also resistance. Built into the language and the singing of these hymns is the idea of resistance. In other words, yes, we're confined to this plantation, or yes, we're confined to this work yard, but God is still with us. You are not in control, God is. So this song, again, you'll hear it have the cadence. Many of you have heard What a Friend We Have in Jesus kind of done like this most of the time. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. That's kind of the traditional way it's sang. But in these churches, in the churches of my upbringing, it was done this way. So it was lined. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. And what a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Let's skip to the last verse. Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? Have we trial and temptation? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Take it to the Lord in prayer. So that is the way that song was translated into a song for workforces. I'm going to, because of time, I'm going to skip to this one. The young lady in the previous clip, as well as this one, is named Crystal Smith. This is just sort of another quick example of how hymns and songs of the Black church are, again, translated differently from our Glory Be to God and the Blue Hymnal, but sang by an exhorter or a hymn raiser from the congregation.
Sing it, Crystal, sing it.
This is during a Lord's Supper or communion service. So I wanted to share that as we begin to wrap up, because many traditions consider the time of taking the Lord's Supper as this really, really, really quiet time of solitude. And I can tell you that in these traditions, songs like that, in most churches of my upbringing, that particular song, it more efficaciously than just taking the little cup of wine and the bread, however we took it, wasn't where the Spirit moved. It was during the song when the whole congregation was led by whomever the person was that raised that particular hymn during the taking of the communion. My last sharing here as we wrap up for today, a last note, is in that we have these, how do I say it, these translations, these interpretations of these hymns that are performed in the church, in the congregation. But I can also tell you that they're also interpreted beyond the congregation. And this one, sort of the last display of the day, gives me much joy. And it is, let's see, Liz Wright, who is both a gospel and a jazz artist, who sings one of our favorite songs from the hymn book, Walk With Me, Lord. But she sings this as a part of her jazz repertoire. So I'm going to share this, just a moment of it, and then we will go to any question and answer you may have.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. While I'm on this teacher's journey, Lord. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me, Lord. Yeah, yeah. Hold my hand, Lord. Please come and hold my hand. Yeah. Hold my hand, Lord. Please hold my hand. Yeah. While I'm on this, I'm down here alone on this journey, Lord. I need you to come and hold my hand. Hey, hold my hand. Yeah.
So I'm sure we could all listen to a lot of Liz Wright this afternoon. I certainly can. I needed to end there. Certainly appreciate you all being with us today and listening through all of that. But much like "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah," "Walk with Me, Lord" is a cry. It's a plea to God, even for a jazz artist in a jazz audience, that we need God in these treacherous times where we are dealing with issues of racism and prejudice around something as simple as skin color and hair texture. But it is with God's Spirit that we will come together as people, stand together as people, and at some point truly be able to not just be in the same building and sing, but be of the same heart and mind and sing together. I thank you.
Amen. Carlton, thank you for your time sharing your perspective today. You continue to guide us in your writing and in your work in the church. Also, Carlton, your voice with the PAM Advisory Council has helped us to push forward, not only in finding ways that we've been misinformed, but also to push us to ways to find a better understanding of one another, a better way that our music, our voices, and our faith mesh together as a community. And you have, we appreciate your work both in the greater church and as a part of PAM and everything that we do. And with that, we have great thanks. I don't see any questions that have come in. I am glad to say, I'm glad my microphone was not on, because as you and Kara were singing, it draws me in and makes me want to sing with you. Could you say just a minute about the community responsibility of singing in this way? The exhorter does a very specific job of lining out, but there's a role for the community that sings together as well. Can you talk about that for just a moment, which will give folks a chance to add a question if they want. But,
Sure.
But that invitation, to me, it truly is an invitation to sing together. And I'm curious about how that plays a role in this this old meter together.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think you nailed it right there in the midst of your question. It is the idea of when we sing from the hymn books, we make a lot of assumptions. We make the assumption that everyone can read hymn books. We make the assumption that, everybody's glasses are working well that day. We also make the assumption that when we're reading from hymn books, that everybody in the audience knows how to read the notes in the hymn book. But when we do in the line hymn old metering, there's a couple of things. Number one, we make sure that everyone has heard the words, right? That's first. So there's the first invitation. The second one is, and especially if you'll recall the singing that was done when I showed the clip with E. Dewey Smith, is that the exhorter will occasionally kind of chime in just a little bit of their voice to kind of keep the notes steady, to make sure everybody's on key. And at the same time, it's an invitation to add your own notes, add your own melodies. Today, I really appreciate Kara. She, again, that's the singer, not me, but she actually did a piece of adding different notes throughout her time of joining me, so that you could hear how it sounds when there's a larger congregation. It's not just soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. There's 15 different notes, and it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. So it is an invitation to come as you are and participate and make this thing not a melting pot. I really hate that idea, right, of a melting pot. Let's not make it a melting pot. Let's make it a super salad where it's just really nourishing. And we see all the ingredients. We can hear all these different notes, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that gets me about the, my first reaction as a musician who's used to looking at scores and used to looking at a hymnal is that this is not written down. And you talk about that in your article. You talk about how this cannot be transcribed because so much of the music comes from the soul and the expression and the swell together. And I think that it's important that we have tried to transcribe this. We have tried to put this in choral settings, and it loses something because we get so stuck on notes and rhythms, and it's not the same at all. And I think it's very important for the tradition, as you said, that has been passed around or passed down in a way that still requires an embodiment of those emotions that are coming out together as an individual, but also in a community like that. There's a question that has come in along with many words of thanks. How do you best answer the question to a predominantly white congregation? How do you, Carlton, best answer the question to a predominantly white congregation when you, as a music minister, are asked, aren't you appropriating the music when a piece of music is introduced to the congregation? Am I able to have an educational conversation with a choir, or I am able to have an educational conversation with a choir, but it can be hard to do with an entire congregation. And Megan also says that she loved the conversation on old metered hymns today.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I don't think it's cultural appropriation to do the hymns, not even to do them in the old meter form. It becomes appropriation when, it's an enactment, right? But if it's truly determining that you're going to do it and honor the gift, right? Honor that this is a gift to the church, which includes going and listening to it and rehearsing it. Carol was making a note to me that myself, her, and many of the folks, they took years to sit with and learn this through listening to it and practicing. Know, in fact, that when you try one of these hymns, even after you as a music leader or a praise leader have sat with it for however much time and you've got it, but it's going to take that congregation some time doing it over and over again. But by beginning with sharing that we're honoring this tradition that we know is not ours, right? But it's a tradition that we want to try and invite the Spirit in through this tradition, because again, It's been effective in other churches. And just as, our expectation, if you will, is that they will use our hymn books and the hymns that we share. Let us take this opportunity to share these arrangements of the same hymns in our congregation. And likewise, and finally, take the time to know that you can take 2 minutes to talk about the history of the hymns. Please feel free to use the article I wrote and take a snippet from that essay to share with your congregation, even including putting some notes on your big screens, your video screens, to share with them as you share.
Yeah, and if I can be so bold to add to what you're saying, I've found in the conversation, to whatever tradition we're considering adopting into our worship language as a congregation, if it's appropriate to the liturgy, and if it's an effective means of expression and worship, then we should find the best way to present it as a tool for the congregation to use. And there are times that this is the only way to express what needs to be expressed in worship. There are times that it's not the right way. So intent, education, as you say, and most of all, where does that liturgy drive us, and what needs to be available to us as we respond to God in worship? Those are wonderful thoughts, and I am so grateful for your time with us today. I look forward to more that comes from Call to Worship, from this issue and more down the road. This is a small step for us all. So thank you for your thoughts and your time today. Kara, thank you for joining us. I look forward to time when we can hear you sing and Carlton be back up. Maybe we'll just have to arrange that. I'll be in touch soon.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Andrew, let me toss it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for a great discussion today. And thank you all for being here. As a reminder, you can watch the recording of this town hall and check out our upcoming schedule at presbymusic.org/town-hall. And while you're there, be sure to check out the 2022 Worship and Music Conference website to learn more about what's in store for next summer. For the Presbyterian Association of Musicians, I'm Andrew Perkins. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.